What if the real reason avoidant people pull away has far less to do with you and much more to do with what makes them feel emotionally safe? There is something most people only understand after a relationship has already become painful. You may think you know why an avoidant becomes distant, goes quiet, or suddenly changes when the connection starts becoming deeper. But understanding their behavior requires looking beyond the surface. A lot of what you hear about avoidant people is only part of the story, and many assumptions about what they actually need from relationships are completely off. If you don't understand this, you can easily become trapped in the same cycle. You get closer, they retreat. You become anxious, you reach harder, and eventually, the connection breaks down. But here's the truth. Avoidant people aren't necessarily escaping love itself. They're often trying to escape what their nervous system interprets as unsafe. And that distinction changes everything. One of the qualities they may respond to most strongly is emotional groundedness. Not pretending you don't care, not hiding your feelings, not becoming detached just to look strong. Groundedness means staying connected to yourself even when another person temporarily disconnects from you. When someone you care about pulls away, it's completely natural for your mind to start racing. You replay conversations, you analyze their messages, you wonder what changed. You start questioning whether you said something wrong, or whether you're somehow not enough. But emotional wounds can turn someone's distance into a false statement about your value. Being grounded means recognizing that their withdrawal may be connected to their own attachment patterns rather than your worth. You can feel fear, disappointment, or confusion without allowing those emotions to control your next move. Avoidant people can become especially sensitive to emotional pressure because closeness may have become associated with demands, conflict, overwhelm, or losing their personal space. So when they begin feeling emotionally crowded, they may instinctively create distance. And they often anticipate what will happen next. They expect questions, they expect repeated messages, they expect emotional reactions. They expect someone to chase them and demand immediate reassurance. But imagine what happens when none of that occurs. You don't become cold. You don't punish them. You don't disappear to make them jealous. You simply remain steady. You communicate through your behavior, "I care about you, but I am not going to lose myself because you need some room." That can feel completely different to someone who is accustomed to experiencing closeness as pressure. Most people respond to distance by trying to close the distance immediately. They send another message, explain themselves repeatedly, apologize for things they didn't do, or desperately try to restore the connection. And ironically, the harder they chase, the more overwhelmed the avoidant may become. Not necessarily because the person chasing did something terrible, but because the reaction can reinforce an old internal belief. Closeness leads to pressure, and pressure means danger. Now picture the same situation handled differently. You feel the anxiety, but you don't immediately act from it. You give them breathing room without abandoning your own self-respect. You remain kind without begging. You stay open without forcing intimacy. That kind of response can challenge the story an avoidant has carried for years. They begin to experience something unfamiliar. Distance does not automatically create chaos. They pull back, and you don't fall apart. They need space, and you don't turn it into punishment. They become quiet, and you don't create an emotional crisis around it. Over time, that can create a small but meaningful shift in how they experience closeness with you. They may begin to realize that intimacy doesn't always mean losing freedom, being overwhelmed, or becoming responsible for another person's emotional stability. That's why groundedness can become so powerful. It doesn't mean becoming silent about your needs. It means communicating those needs without panic. Instead of reacting, you respond. Instead of demanding reassurance, you communicate clearly. Instead of abandoning yourself, you remain rooted in who you are. You might say, "I care about this connection, and I'm here when you're ready to talk. I respect that you need space, but I also respect my own needs." That kind of energy reflects self-respect, emotional maturity, and genuine confidence. And people can feel that. For someone who has learned to survive relationships by keeping others at a safe distance, encountering a person who remains calm without becoming emotionally unavailable can be surprisingly powerful. You show them that their withdrawal doesn't control your entire emotional world. You show them that feelings don't have to become explosions. You show them that closeness can exist without constant pressure. And slowly, trust can begin to develop. There is something rare about someone who can remain emotionally present without chasing, demanding, controlling, or punishing. Many people only know two extremes: holding on too tightly or shutting down completely. But there is another way. You can care deeply without losing yourself. You can give someone room without abandoning the relationship. You can remain emotionally available without becoming emotionally dependent on their every response. That balance can make you stand out. Avoidant people may be accustomed to expecting anger, guilt, emotional storms, or silent retaliation whenever they create distance. They may anticipate consequences simply because that's what their past experiences have taught them to expect. But when they meet someone who doesn't crumble, doesn't chase, doesn't manipulate, and doesn't use silence as a weapon, something begins to feel different. For once, space doesn't come with punishment. For once, closeness doesn't automatically come with overwhelming pressure. And for someone who has spent years protecting themselves through distance, that sense of emotional safety can become the beginning of real trust. That kind of emotional steadiness can feel completely unfamiliar to an avoidant person. Imagine they take a small step backward, and instead of meeting pressure, they encounter calmness from you. You don't crowd them. You don't disappear to punish them. You don't become cold to prove a point. You simply remain grounded, warm, and emotionally open. For perhaps the first time, they experience relief. They don't feel responsible for carrying your emotions. They don't feel as though they've disappointed you. They don't feel trapped by the relationship or pressured to immediately decide what happens next. Instead, they feel respected. And respect can feel incredibly freeing to someone who fears losing their independence. When you give them room while still remaining emotionally present, your message becomes simple. I'm here, and I'm okay. That reassurance reaches a part of them that fears being controlled or consumed. Instead of feeling trapped, they feel that they still have a choice. And choice matters enormously to avoidant people. They need to feel that closeness is something they can move toward voluntarily, rather than something being forced upon them. When you confidently maintain your own emotional space, you give them the opportunity to approach you when they are ready. But there is an important distinction here. Giving an avoidant space does not mean disappearing, becoming icy, pretending you don't care, or cutting off your warmth. That's not healthy space. That's withdrawal. And they can usually feel the difference. When you suddenly become cold, they may interpret it as rejection. When you stop communicating to make them suffer, they may experience it as punishment. When you intentionally remove your warmth, it can confirm the belief that relationships eventually become unsafe. Healthy space looks completely different. You remain emotionally available without demanding immediate closeness. You keep your warmth. You continue living your own life. You don't over-explain, chase, or desperately try to remove every uncomfortable feeling. You remain yourself while allowing them the room they need. Your stability becomes something they can return to. Think of it like a lighthouse. It doesn't chase the ship. It doesn't force the ship toward shore. It simply remains visible and steady. That is something many avoidant people rarely experience. They're often familiar with two extremes. People who take their need for space personally and become upset, or people who respond by pushing harder, asking endless questions, and demanding emotional reassurance. Someone who can remain centered through that uncertainty is different. They aren't acting from fear. They're not trying to control the relationship. They don't need constant reassurance to feel valuable. They understand that a temporary pause doesn't automatically mean rejection, and that someone's need for space doesn't determine their worth. And that confidence can feel deeply calming. When you learn to hold your own emotional space, you also teach the avoidant something they may never have fully understood. Connection doesn't have to become a struggle for control. It doesn't have to be a chase. It doesn't have to be one person pulling while the other runs. Two people can care about each other, communicate honestly, remain individuals, and still give each other room to breathe. That kind of relationship can gradually change how an avoidant experiences intimacy. What once felt threatening can begin to feel manageable. What once triggered the urge to escape can slowly become something they can stay present with. And the transformation isn't only happening inside them, it happens inside you too. You stop living in constant reaction. You stop believing that every uncomfortable moment must immediately be fixed. You stop sacrificing your emotional well-being just to keep someone close. Instead, you learn that you can survive uncertainty. You begin protecting your peace. You trust yourself more. And that quiet confidence becomes visible even when you say nothing. They notice that you aren't forcing anything. They notice that you don't fill every silence with anxious explanations. They notice that their need for space doesn't automatically become a relationship crisis. And that creates a completely different kind of attraction. You become someone they can breathe around, someone they can return to without immediately expecting another emotional burden. Someone whose presence feels more like freedom than responsibility. Being able to hold your own space without punishing another person is a powerful form of emotional maturity. It means you have learned to regulate yourself. You understand that another person's behavior can trigger emotions in you without becoming responsible for your entire emotional state. You can love without controlling. You can connect without panicking. You can care deeply without abandoning yourself. And that kind of stability offers an avoidant something they may desperately want, but struggle to ask for: emotional safety. Safety creates the foundation for closeness. This is also why your self-worth matters so much. When your confidence isn't dependent on how an avoidant behaves, you're no longer handing them control over your emotional center. Many people react to avoidant distance as though it is a verdict about their value. They panic, they overthink, they become angry or insecure. They make the relationship the center of their identity. So when attention decreases, their entire sense of stability begins to shake. But someone who knows their worth understands something much healthier. Another person's behavior is information about their emotional state, not a measurement of your value. Imagine how relieving that can be for an avoidant. They step back and you don't collapse. They become quiet and you don't immediately assume you're unwanted. They need time, and you don't demand that they carry your emotional security. You communicate that you can stand on your own. That can remove one of their deepest fears, the fear that someone will become so emotionally dependent on them that they can never have room to breathe. They don't necessarily want to hurt you. They don't necessarily want to disappoint you. But if they believe your emotional world depends entirely on their attention, they can feel an enormous amount of pressure. And pressure often makes them retreat. A self-assured person changes that dynamic. You become someone they can respect because you respect yourself. Someone they can trust because you aren't using the relationship to fill an emotional emptiness. Someone they can approach without believing they are responsible for your happiness. This isn't arrogance or emotional detachment, it's inner stability. It says, I know who I am. I know what I deserve. I want love and connection, but I don't need another person's every reaction to feel whole. That energy can be incredibly powerful. Avoidant people aren't necessarily searching for someone perfect. They're often looking for an environment where they don't feel emotionally trapped. When your self-worth remains steady, despite their changing behavior, you communicate something without even saying it. I choose this connection, but I won't lose myself inside it. That can make closeness feel less threatening. Instead of feeling like your presence requires them to surrender their independence, they can begin to experience the relationship as a place where they are allowed to remain themselves. And when they pull away, the usual cycle begins to look different. Their distance doesn't create panic. Your calm doesn't create more pressure. The old pattern gets interrupted. They may begin wondering why this connection feels different. Why doesn't closeness automatically lead to emotional chaos? Why doesn't this person fall apart when I need space? Why does being around them feel calmer than expected? Slowly, their assumptions can begin to change. Maybe intimacy doesn't have to feel suffocating. Maybe love can still leave room for individuality. Maybe connection can feel peaceful. Your consistent sense of self gives them emotional room to process their own feelings without constantly worrying about how you will react. They may begin to feel safer, showing uncertainty, vulnerability, and imperfection. And that is where deeper trust can begin. When you stop measuring your worth by how much closeness they can offer on any particular day, you become a stable presence instead of another source of emotional pressure. You don't beg, you don't chase, you don't plead. You don't let fear control every interaction. You simply remain rooted in yourself. And that can become unforgettable to someone who has spent years protecting themselves through distance. You're showing them that a relationship doesn't have to consume them, that they can remain individuals while being connected, that love doesn't have to erase their freedom. But there's one more thing that matters. An avoidant often pulls away when they sense that someone is trying to fix them, decode them, or transform them into the partner they think they should become. The moment the relationship starts feeling like a project, they can feel the pressure. They may sense the hidden message: if I can just get you to open up more, explain your past, become more vulnerable, and let me get closer, then you'll finally become the person I need. Even when that intention comes from love, it can feel suffocating. Avoidant people may have spent years feeling misunderstood or pressured to behave differently. So when someone tries to reshape them under the disguise of helping them, their instinct may be to create even more distance. Not necessarily because they don't care, but because pressure, even when presented as love, can still feel like a loss of freedom. That internal warning system immediately activates, telling them that something isn't safe. But then they meet someone different, someone who doesn't constantly question them, pressure them, or dig into every hidden emotion as though they're solving a psychological case. Someone who doesn't demand vulnerability on a specific timeline. And something changes. For perhaps the first time, they experience genuine acceptance. Not the kind of acceptance where someone smiles and says they are okay with them while secretly planning how to change them later. Not the kind where every emotional moment gets remembered and brought up whenever there's conflict. Real acceptance says, you are allowed to be yourself. I don't need to rush your process. I'm not here to repair you. And I don't see you as something that needs fixing. That kind of acceptance can be incredibly powerful for an avoidant person. Their defenses begin to soften. They stop constantly anticipating the next boundary being crossed. They stop waiting for another emotionally intense conversation that they aren't prepared to have. They no longer feel as though they need an escape plan every time the relationship becomes vulnerable. For once, they can simply exist. They can breathe without wondering when the pressure will begin. This doesn't mean avoidant people don't want meaningful relationships. They can want intimacy, emotional depth, affection, and genuine connection just as much as anyone else. The difference is often the pace. They may need more time before they feel comfortable opening up. They may need to become familiar with someone's presence before revealing their deeper emotions. They want closeness to feel like a choice they are making, rather than something they're being pushed into because another person is anxious. And this is where people often misunderstand them. Their slower pace can look like a lack of emotion, but sometimes it is simply a different emotional rhythm. When you respect that rhythm, something surprising can happen. They may begin opening up more naturally. They may share things voluntarily that they would have hidden if they felt pressured. They may become more emotionally expressive because the decision to open up belongs to them. And that sense of choice can be extremely important. For an avoidant person, intimacy often becomes safer when they feel they can move toward it willingly rather than being pulled into it. Think about how frequently avoidant people are criticized for the way they relate to others. They may have been called cold, distant, overly private, emotionally unavailable, difficult, confusing, or too independent. They may have heard these judgments from romantic partners, friends, or even people close to them. So when someone finally enters their life without trying to change their personality, something feels different. They no longer feel as though their independence is under attack. They don't feel like they have to constantly protect themselves from being reshaped. Instead, they feel understood as a person who simply has a different way of approaching emotional closeness. And here's what many people overlook. An avoidant person may need emotional safety even more than they need immediate closeness. And acceptance creates safety. Updatance doesn't demand. It doesn't force someone into emotional conversations before they're ready. It doesn't drag them into vulnerability simply because you want answers right now. It communicates something much healthier. I see you as you are. I respect your pace. I want connection with you, not control over you. When an avoidant genuinely feels that from someone, their defenses can gradually come down. They may stop hiding certain parts of themselves. They may become less guarded. They may begin revealing thoughts, fears, and emotions that they rarely show other people. And the important part is that you didn't force those things out of them. They offered them because they finally felt free enough to do so. There is also an interesting paradox here. When you stop trying so hard to change an avoidant person, they may actually become more willing to grow. Not because you pressured them into becoming different, but because you've created an environment where change doesn't feel like a requirement for being loved. Your acceptance gives them room to develop naturally. Your patience tells them they don't have to perform vulnerability. Your calmness makes it easier for their softer side to emerge. Many people believe pushing harder will create more intimacy. But with avoidant tendencies, pressure can produce the exact opposite. The harder you try to decode every reaction, the more guarded they may become. The more you allow them room, the more likely they are to reveal themselves voluntarily. The more you attempt to control their emotional process, the more they may retreat. The more you respect their pace while maintaining your own boundaries, the more trust can develop. Avoidant people can often sense when someone views them as a project. They can feel the expectation underneath the questions. They can sense when every interaction is secretly about getting them to become more emotionally available. But they can also recognize the rare person who sees them as a complete human being, someone with fears, imperfections, boundaries, contradictions, and a slower path toward vulnerability. And that difference matters. Because when someone feels accepted rather than managed, they no longer have to spend all their energy protecting themselves. They can begin participating in the relationship instead of constantly defending their independence. They can choose closeness rather than feeling trapped by it. And that is why genuine acceptance can reach an avoidant in a way pressure never will. You don't have to become their therapist. You don't have to solve their past. You don't have to analyze every silence. You don't have to force their heart open. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can offer is the freedom to be themselves, while still making it clear that your own needs and boundaries matter too. Because acceptance is not about tolerating unhealthy behavior. It is about recognizing that another person is allowed to have their own emotional pace. And when that pace is respected, something beautiful can happen. The person who once felt the need to run may finally feel safe enough to stay.